Part 1 of session 46 of the Law of One. Let's talk about Gandalf, the cat. Let's begin. Quick refresher from the past couple of sessions. We were talking about mainly personal material that was excluded from the original books in its totality. So this is the first session that we get where there is some information that was actually shared in the original books. So it still follows to a degree some of the personal stuff. It's kind of interesting how at this point they were talking about all this stuff on, soul evolution, higher self, and everything else. And as Carla actually got a little weaker, I started to get concerned. And now things sort of turned a little bit on the personal side, as we're going to see with the questions that Don had, in terms of, I was going to say cat Delph. It's Gandalf, but cat Delph. Get it? So in any case, the first couple of questions are going to be from personal material that you're going to find in book 5, or if you have the raw contact, you'll find it in session 46, or if you have the released version, or just are checking the lawofone.info or lawofone.info, then it's session 46 as well. So there is one question that actually was not in the original books, nor in book 5. So I say original books, but their book 5 is also original books. And that's the first question that we're going to get. Some of the questions were excluded totally. Some of them are kind of understandable why they took them away. And some others, as we're going to find out, there's a controversial one in one of the 50s sessions, in the mid 50s, I think, 56 or so. But I'm not going to spoil it. We'll get to that, and you'll see why they decided to exclude it. And it became controversial because it was kind of like information that a lot of people would have loved to have, but when you understand why they excluded, then you understand really, there was a genuine reason to take it out. In any case, that first question that was excluded, actually, you can see why. Don says, could we please first an indication of the instrument's condition? And Roger says this instrument scans at present at extremely low physical energy and is under attack. This will continue for some of your weeks. However, the vital energies of this instrument is gradually restoring its former level. So, Carla, as you remember, she was in session 44. She was diagnosed by Ra, to have very low vital energy, and her physical energy was also pretty much depleted. And so they took a week and a half off or something like that. They came back. She was still weak in session 45, and now in session 46 she's still weak. So this was a concern at the time, of course, because Carla was Carla first and foremost, and she was also the instrument for the raw context. So in any case, the things that Ra says are mildly interesting, in terms of how her physical energy was extremely low, and that she was under attack. Now, let's start getting the premise for this attack that they were getting from a negative entity. I don't know if it was from the Orion group or not, but it was a negative entity from 5th density that it's going to be a little bit more pronounced, I believe, in the 70s or late 60s sessions. That's when they started getting the attack really strong, and they started getting more information about this, how to deal with this attack. I don't think at this moment they knew what was happening totally, but you can see already that Ra is saying this has been happening, I think, since the latest sessions, session 30, upper session 30s, the 36, 38, somewhere around there. I think Ra mentioned something about Carla being under attack, but I don't think they really noticed that. But this has been going on for a while, and this started because of the information that, again, I talked about this in another video in a previous session. How, depending on the information that they are channeling, these entities are going to be attracted to the light and try to suppress it. That's what negative entities do. That's how they polarize more towards the negative. That's their fuel for evolution. And so Ra says this will continue for some of your weeks. I also believe that because she was so weak in terms of physical energy and vital energy, that also attracted the entity to attack more. Because if you're weak, then guess what? They're going to take advantage of you. And that's what they did. They would do subtle things like just cause physical pain on Carla. Not physical, but trigger physical pain that was already there, like arthritis. Her arthritis would get worse. And during the session, she would get spasms and things like that. So it's kind of subtle. It's not like, they're going to come out with a flaming sword out of the ether and stab you. In any case, however, the vital energy of this instrument is gradually restored into its former level. She was still pretty weak, but she was restoring after, the caring that they did. So, Don, worried as he usually was for Carla, says, in that case, we'd better ask you only one question, unless you deem it all right to ask any more questions than that. But the one question that is bothering us, which I got in meditation, may be an inappropriate question, but I feel it my duty to ask it because it is central to the instrument's mental condition and ours. It has to do with 2 cats, which we are going to take to have worked upon today for teeth cleaning and the small growth removed from Gandalf's leg. I got the impression that there might be an inroad there for the Orion group, and I was primarily concerned about anything that we could do for protection of these 2 cats. I may be out of line in asking this, but I feel it my duty to ask it. Would you please give me information, all the information you can, on that subject? So, before I get into Ra's answer, which I think it's pretty long here, a couple of things. One, you can see how they were really loving, with animals, especially with cats. And we have some information about their cats being, already we talked about that. They had been invested so much with love, and in previous incarnations, they had such an evolution that we're gonna find out something actually really cool and interesting here about pets. And I want to make an emphasis there because people who love pets or animals in general, that's quite interesting, for our model of the law of one. So one thing to denote again from this is that you can see how loving they were with their cats, just to include them, in a session like this, which again, Don said that this was, his life work, and rightly so it was. There's nothing else that Don did that was of much, let's say, relevance. I don't want to say important, but because that's a subjective thing, but relevant to his line of work than the raw contact, right? I mean, everything else was just a preparation for him to do this work. And Carla has mentioned it as well. She was she was willing to die for this contact. So, in any case, it's just they show their humanity and empathy for animals here, which I don't know. I just wanted to mention it. And the question, just to get back in line with the session, is about. I don't know how Don would think that the Orion group could attack the cats, maybe, because as he says, there's an inroad for the Orion group to attack, or impression that there might be an inroad there for the Orion group, and I was primarily concerned about anything we could do for protection of these 2 cats. So he's asking for, what can we do, basically for the cats. And Ra is going to answer. The entity, here we go, I should have highlighted this, mind-body-spirit complex Gandalf, the cat, not Gandalf the gray or the white, being harvestable third density, is open to the same type of psychic attack to which you yourselves are vulnerable. Therefore, Through the mechanism of images and dreams, it is potentially possible for negative concepts to be offered to this mind-body-spirit complex, thus having possible deleterious results. The entity Fairchild, that's the other cat, though harvestable through investment, does not have the vulnerability to attack in as great an amount due to a lack of the mind complex activity in the distortion of conscious devotion. So, there's more to say about this, but first, the mind-body-spirit complex Gandalf, and I think Don asks about this, I'm not sure, but we can already see that Gandalf has a spirit. Now remember, cats, as well as any other animal, is second-density consciousness, which means that they are only mind-body complex, but they start getting inspirited, like Ra says, and this is a complex discussion. I have my own idea as to how the spirit or the mind-body is endowed with spirit, but I don't want to get there. It's let's just imagine that there is a spirit that starts to be funneled to the entity, in this case the cat. But in this case, Gandalf already had a spirit, which means it already had guidance and a sort of very fussy higher self acting with him. But at the same time, it made him vulnerable to psychic attacks because it was already a mind-body-spirit complex. So, a couple of things that they say here: the mechanisms of images and dreams. That's the mechanism for imprinting negative, let's call it influence. So you can see how many, I don't know how many animals do this, but all my dogs, I've always seen that they dream. You can see that they're dreaming, and their reactions are almost like they're in the dream, like they're moving their legs or moving their snout, or just kind of like wimping or something. So this is an activity done by the mind of the entity, and depending on the spiritual nature of the animal, then through that spirit connection, let's say, there is a possibility for Orion to also create. I mean, that's kind of ruthless. I mean, I normally say, well, whatever, Orion, but come on, leave my animals alone, man. Leave them alone. But I don't know. I guess they'll take whatever they can just to distort anything in the creation, right? As long as they can polarize more to the negative. I don't know. I'm not here to judge them, but come on. Leave my animals alone. Yeah, I'm not sure how this can create more deleterious results, like they say, like causing... how can that happen? I mean, I don't know. If you have any idea, leave them in the comments, because I love to read anything that you guys can think about. Yeah, I can't think about anything that animals can't behave. Maybe through some sort of rejection. I want to call it that. And we're going to get into cancer and anger here. So maybe that. I know that some dogs that I've had in the past, I don't know if they had spirits, but they were pretty angry. And I don't know how much of the Orion group or any negative entity would have an influence on that. So I don't know. I'm treading on very flaky territory here. So in any case, I'll keep up with this. Ross says, the entity Fairchild, though harvestable through investment, does not have the vulnerability to attack in a great amount due to a lack of the mind complex activity, the distortion of conscious devotion. So Carla makes a comment in, I think it's Gandalf that she mentions in book 5, or in the realism version. You can see it in the commentaries that they make, Jim and Carla, for the session, that Gandalf was very devoted to them. Like he was like very devoted to Don and Carla. I don't know how long they had it so far at this point, but in any case, this cat was really devoted to them. Apparently Fairchild wasn't that much, he was just a regular cat. I don't know. They do say that he was harvestable through investment, that investment being love, of course, that they gave to him, possibly from other incarnations. But the Fairchild didn't have a very active mind complex, I guess, in the direction. I mean, say distortion. I know Ra loves distortion. I don't know how many times they use distortion throughout the whole channeling, but you know what that means. It's just a preference or an inclination, a bias, or a sort of, that's what they call distortion. So, not much mind complex activity in the inclination for conscious devotion. So, I don't know. I guess that's something also that it's required for distorting, because I guess you can influence. I mean, that's pretty low, Ryan. That's pretty low. Influence animals, so they're pets, so they don't, they're not as loving or devoted to to their owners. I don't know. Maybe I'm speculating there, but that's the only way I can think about. Like, if Fairchild didn't have much activity in his mind for conscious devotion, that means that it wasn't. See, like, that's the weak point for the Orion group, not to make an inroad there. So that means that those who have a conscious devotion, at least in this case, or in this example, then they are susceptible to attack. Huh, that's interesting. See, never thought of it this way. So I guess depend on the devotion of our pets to us. Ra continues and says, for protection of these entities, we might indicate two possibilities. Firstly, the meditation, putting on the armor of light. Secondly, the repetition of short ritual sentences known to this instrument from the establishment which distorts spiritual oneness for this instrument. I love how they say religion. This instrument's knowledge will suffice. This will aid due to the alerting of many discarnate entities also aware of these ritual sentences. The meditation is appropriate at the time of the activity on behalf of these entities. The ritual may be repeated with efficacy from this time until the safe return at convenient intervals. So, here's what to do with your pets if you feel they can be under attack, and even if they're not. I mean, I don't want to cause... I don't like the way that sounds, but alright, we're talking about possibility of pets being under attack by the Orion group, so what you can do to protect them is always... I mean, it's the same recipe for everything. Just love him, and just have thoughts of compassion, caring, and loving, and love for them. So they say, firstly, the meditation, putting on the armor of light. Does that mean putting on the armor yourself for them, or putting them an armor of light? I guess both works. Secondly, in essence, what they're saying is just, this is, personal advice to them. So Carla had some, what do they call them? Repetition of short ritual sentences. So prayers, that type of thing for Carla, who was Christian. And, it's known to Carla. So it's not that we need to borrow, from Carla's, that's the teaching, for helping our animals, our pets. No. That means simply, what works for her, whatever works for you, whatever. Like, I like to think there are confederation entities that I think we talked about this in session 19 or 20, somewhere around there, when we were talking about second density evolution, is that there are confederation entities who devote themselves entirely to second density evolution. Second density light, that's what they do. They send unconditional love, undifferentiated love and light to these entities. So I personally, because I have such an empathy, or not an empathy, but I have an affinity with the Confederation's philosophy, I often think about them when I think about my pet, Oliver. And, since they are like their guides, then why not? I mean, call upon the Confederations for them. Even though they're not invested with their densities, if you call them, I mean, they are in service of the one, right? So that's my thing. If you have any sort of prayer or meditation rituals or some sort of meditative state, whatever works, I guess. It's all about the intention and, of course, the direction in which you want to put that intention, which is for your pets. So What else they say? This will aid you to the alerting of many discarnate entities also aware of these ritual sentences. I think this is important because the potency of anything that we use, it depends first on your personal affinity with it, and second on the collective affinity, incarnate or discarnate, doesn't matter. So for example, if I devise, a sort of very particular fractal, and I design it and I say this fractal is going to be my illustration of power, that will be strong from the personal level, but on a collective level it won't, because nobody else knows that fractal geometry. Whereas if I use the cross or the Buddha or the Star of David or anything else that is extremely popular, not only in the collective incarnate population, but also in the spiritual or discarnate planes, then that's going to have more effect. So that's what they're saying here. This will aid due to the alerting of many discarnate entities also aware of these ritual sentences. So it's almost like you're calling upon their power, let's say. So they say the meditation is appropriate at the time of the activity on behalf of these entities. Of course, the rituals may be repeated with efficacy from this time until the safe return at convenient intervals. So they could have done it until they were done, with their operation or whatever they were going to do. So yeah, interesting. Let's go. Next question. Don says, I'm not familiar with the ritual sentences. If the instrument is familiar, you need not answer this, but which sentences do you mean? And Ra says nothing. Crickets in the background. That is because Don says, I assume this instrument is familiar. Ra says, this is correct. So Carla was obviously familiar with... Don just wanted to corroborate. So Don says, can you tell me something of the little growth on Gandalf's leg? What caused it? And if it is a danger to him? So Ra says, the cause of such growths has been previously discussed. The danger to the physical body complex is slight given the lack of repeated stimulus to anger. So, I believe when they say the cause of such growth have been previously discussed is because they talked about cancer already. We've covered that in that session, and this is where the direction of the rest of the session is going to go into cancer, because there is much to talk about that, and that is, there is a lot to talk about that, and that's why I'm breaking this down in two videos. As usual, this is not a long session at all, but it's the cancer talk I know I can expand myself maybe a little too much. I'll try to keep it short for the second video. But in any case, the cause of such growth is because of our predisposition for cancer and the mismanagement of anger, which we'll talk about in this session. So they say the danger to the physical body complex is slight given the lack of repeated stimulus to anger. So it's almost like because their presence and how they treated Gandalf, they weren't allowing or permitting too much anger or any anger at all to the cat. And that was great because that's good health, right? If you're in a loving environment, you're going to be healthy. And you obviously, best environment, loving environment is your own self. So, but they can't. Gandalf was on his own there. They could only provide that environment. So that's interesting. That's another thing. That's a good take out of this, because your environment, and you create your environment. That's another thing. The self is not only the physical body. The self expands in your whole awareness. In fact, the self is awareness. So if I'm looking at that tree over there, that tree is me right now. That is who I am. I am that tree. I am that house. I am my neighbor if I see him. I am everything I see in perception, because I am not something inside here looking at the outside. I am everything that is around me. So It's not only, to be like, oh, I'm cool with myself, but all those things that I don't approve, and I have to deal with daily, that's disgusting, but I am not that. Well, you are, because you just said it. So, in any case, that's another thing to keep note of. Next question, I believe I have it highlighted like this, because this is another question that you will not find in the original books, including book 5, where most of this information comes out from. So Don says, and you can see why again, this is easily excluded. At this time I would ask if we should end the session because of the instrument's low vitality, or whether this is irrelevant because of the dedication to this session already. And we talked about this on the last session, I believe. So Ra says, the latter is correct, you may proceed. We shall monitor the vital energy of this instrument. Just a small recap here. Don had asked before, like, let's end the session, Carl is in danger. Basically, it's what you're saying, let's end it. And Ra says, like, relax. Basically, they said, relax, we're in control, or we're monitoring her energy, no worries, as usual. It's awesome that you're paying attention to this, but her energy was already invested, might as well use it. That's why Donna also asked, can we end the session, or was the energy already invested? And Ra says, oh, that's correct. The latter is correct, meaning that it was invested. Was that what Don said? Yeah, it's relevant, the dedication. That's when Don says, because of the dedication to the session already, that's the investment of energy that Carla already kind of like deposited in the ether. So, yeah, well, not in the ether, but out there, for Ra. Let's put it that way. So, yeah, as usual, they'll monitor it. That's what they said. Don says, question 7. I was just wondering, if an entity polarizes toward the service to self path, would the anger have the same physical effect that it affects an entity polarized towards the service to others path? Would it also cause cancer? Or is it just a catalytic effect working in the positively polarized entity? Ra says, the catalytic mechanisms are dependent not upon the chosen polarity of a mind-body-spirit complex, but upon the use or purpose to which this catalyst is put. Thus, the entity which uses the experience of anger to polarize consciously, positively or negatively, does not experience the bodily catalyst, but rather uses the catalyst in mental configuration. So this is going to start discussion in terms of what happens with the catalyst that is used in terms of anger, right? Would the anger have the same physical effect that it affects? The question is, it's actually pretty clever. Don says, if the entity polarizes, if an entity polarizes towards the service to self path, so in the positive, would the anger have the same physical effect that it affects an entity polarized towards the service to others path, so the negative? Would it also cause cancer? Or is it just a catalytic effect working in the positively polarized entity? Like, is anger something that happens to the positive cancer? Is the anger catalyst something that causes anger on the positive entity, or does it also affect the negative entity? And I think there is a little maybe oversight to this question, and that's what Ra is explaining, because I'm just going to reread what Don said. Would the anger have the same physical effect that it affects an entity polarized? And this is what's going to be clarified, of course. Don didn't know this at this point. So what Ra says, that the catalytic mechanisms are dependent not upon the chosen polarity. It's not. It's almost like, catalyst it's neutral. It's there. It's how you use it, and it's there to provide some sort of growth. Of course, that's what catalyst. Catalyst means the accelerated or acceleration of a process, and the evolution of a process, the reactionary process of that evolution. So they say it's upon the use or purpose to which the catalyst is put, of course, because it depends. Like I said, it's almost like what we call a something can be a tool. A knife can be a tool, or it can be a weapon. What do you use it for? It's completely neutral. Thus, the entity which uses the experience of anger to polarize consciously, positively or negatively. You can use anger to polarize positively or negatively. We're going to see that. I don't know if I'm going to get it into this in this session. If not, I'm just going to give a brief explanation of that, and then we'll cover it in the next video. I meant to say, does not. Okay, what else does it say? Consciously, positive. Does not experience the bodily catalyst, but rather uses the catalyst in mental configuration. So, when they say bodily, they do not experience the bodily catalyst. Means cancer. Cancer is a catalyst as well. Whatever is not used by the mind will be manifested in the body by illness. Usually, any sort of disease or whatever. I can tell you, like, for example, the last time I got sick, which was at the beginning of this year, 2021, I was dealing with a very intense catalyst that it was unable to accept, and it was just causing so much friction in my life that I got sick because I couldn't deal with it mentally. I was exposed to a physical disease where I got fever, I got my body was aching terribly, and I, of course, as usual, I got asthma because I'm asthmatic. So and I only get asthma when I get this cold. It was a simple cold, but the intensity of that cold was really high because of this catalyst. And funny enough, I accepted mentally afterwards because it was a real challenge for me. But in any case, when you don't accept something mentally, it goes to your body. The same thing is happening here. It's not going to manifest if you process it mentally. Like they say, use the catalyst in mental configuration. That just means that you process it mentally. So if you don't understand that, that's fine, because Don doesn't understand it either. And he says in question 8, not sure that I understand that. Let's take some examples. If an entity polarizing toward the negative path becomes angry, let's take the condition where he develops a cancer. What is the principle of that for him? Ra says, we see the trust of your query and will respond at variance with the specific query if that meets with your approval. And Don says, certainly. And so Ra continues. You can also see here that Ra was, they're so perfectionist. I love that part. They just wanted to go to explain a little bit further them, because they got what Don was asking, and they just wanted to expand on it and say, can we? Don says, of course, go ahead, Ra. So Ra says, okay, the entity polarizing positively perceives the anger. This entity, if using the catalyst mentally, blesses and loves this anger in itself. It then intensifies this anger consciously in mind alone until the folly of this red ray energy is perceived, not as folly in itself, but as energy subject to spiritual entropy due to the randomness of energy being used. So, it's going to be a long answer. We're going to take it step by step. It's going to consume the rest of the video, and we'll end it after this. So we can cover cancer in the next video. Second part, session 46. So, Don wanted to know, how does that work? How does anger work for the positive? He wanted to know I think it was for the negative. I forgot the question. In any case, no, I feel terrible. Let's go back to the question. I'm sorry. Yeah, so let's take some examples. If an entity polarizing towards the negative path becomes angry, let's take the condition where he develops a cancer. So, yeah, the question was even a little bit not well formulated, I guess. That's why Ra said, well, we're going to respond at variance with the specific query if that meets with your approval. Okay, so in essence, how does that work for the negative entity that becomes angry? So Ra, the variance that they're putting here is that they're also explaining the positive polarity, the service to others. So, the entity who is positive is going to receive the anger. You're going to get angry at something, okay? Unless you're negative. If you're negative, wait your turn. We're talking about positives here. So you're all welcome here. So this entity, if using the catalyst mentally, blesses and loves this anger in itself. It will, you will receive the anger, okay? You don't have to forcibly do this. But this is the positive entity. Once you have polarized enough, you will see anger as an opportunity for you to learn more about yourself. That's all there is. So, when it blesses and loves the angers in itself, then it intensifies it and consciously does it consciously in mind alone until the folly of this red ray energy is perceived. I love that they say red ray energy because it is a primal reaction that we have. It's a very primitive reaction. Anger it's not a conscious and not very conscious. It's a very instinctive reaction because of some sort of blockage, obviously, that we have. And that blockage is preventing that energy to go up in the energy centers. So it's a very reactionary stuff. It's animalistic, and very low, in the low levels of animalistic behaviors. So it's okay. You receive it and it's energy. All energy is loving. All energy is sexual too, because that's just the nature of the feeling, of the orgasmic feeling of energy, cosmic energy. But so once it's received, you bless it, so on, you love it, and then you're going to intensify it. That's what they say here. Yeah, you intensify this anger consciously in your mind. What does that mean? I mean, imagine I get angry at somebody who went to deliver me a box, and in fact he delivered me his anger, and throws the box at me, and curses at me for whatever reason. I don't know. He may trigger something else in me that, I don't know, I'm a bearded person and I am offended by somebody who is disgusted by beards. I'm just making stuff up. I'm sure there are people like that. But see, that triggers me. And I get angry at the person. And I wish I could just run back to this UPS dude and, punch him in the face. And I want to do this, So that's what I'll recreate in my mind. I'll take it. First of all, I'll say, thank you. That's another good thing about this. You can also always take the anger. This is something that Kuo says, and they've said it a couple of times in other channelings, that when somebody gives you their negative emotions, they're giving you a gift, because you should see it always as somebody who cannot deal with his own energy and just throws it at you. So you receive it and you say, thank you. I know what to do with this. I will not, bring it home and throw it at my wife or my son or my mom or my dog or whatever. I'm not going to keep delivering it. It's like a hot potato. It's not a hot potato. You take the hot potato and you say, I know how to cool this down. And you take it and you understand it, you accept it. See, it's the same process. You bless it and love it. And you take this anger and say, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, I don't understand the chain, from when you were a kid or your wife, whatever did, trigger, wherever it comes from. Because it will come from generations, actually, from the beginning, from the Big Bang, it may come. Actually, not from the Big Bang. Maybe not. Or maybe, yeah, everything can be traced back to that. In any case, you take this anger and you simply process it for something that is just love trying to find its way. And that's how you deal with somebody else's anger. But in the case of the UPS guy that just offended me, see, what I'll intensify is the folly of this anger in terms of what am I going to do? Okay, so I'm going to do it in my mind, and I'm going to follow this guy, I'm going to punch him in the face, and then I'm going to tell him off that, my beard is just my thing, and I, well, I don't want to say that, Then I started getting into, like, what am I doing? Like, if I carry this out, what am I doing? I actually had to deal with this also a couple of years ago. Actually a year and a half ago, and I really felt the need to be aggressive with this person because of what she was doing to me. And I think I talked about this in the past. But I did the same thing. I did it in my mind. I did it alone in my mind until it was just like ridiculous what I wanted to do. And, then the energy is perceived not as folly in itself. Like, the energy itself is not folly. It's what you want to do with the energy. But as energy subject to spiritual entropy due to the randomness of energy being used. That's important. Energy subject to spiritual entropy. So spiritual entropy is just that it vanishes away. It just it deteriorates. It just I forget the word, but it fades away due to the randomness of energy being used. The randomness is the anger itself. Like, it's folly because the way you're using it is not channeling it for love. You're just just throwing it out like the guy who gives you their anger. So that's what you do. You just take it, you work it in your mind, and you perceive the folly. You actually live it in your mind. That's why you have a mind. You don't have to do things in the real world. That's another advice that Ra says. Don't do it out. If you can't do it out there, this is when they say that you should do all things desired. You're here to experience all things desired. If you cannot do it in the physical because you can't, or also because you're going to infringe somebody else's will, then free will, then of course you should do it in your mind and experience it in your mind and see it, and hopefully that helps. If not, then I don't know. But anyhow, Ra says and continues, positive orientation then provides the will and faith to continue this mentally intense experience of letting the anger be understood, accepted, and integrated with the mind-body-spirit complex. With the mind-body-spirit complex, yes. The other self, which is the object of anger, is thus transformed into an object of acceptance, understanding, and accommodation, all being reintegrated using the great energy which anger began. So see, this is just how it processes out. Once you do all this work and you accept it and you don't react and you do all this, this magic. This is what magic is. For those interested in magic, it's all mental magic. It's like alchemy. Alchemy is not transforming, even though it can be done, but it's about transmutation of thoughts and how you perceive things, perception, change in perception. And so, positive orientation then provides the will and faith. Of course, if you have a positive orientation, then you have the will and faith, of course. Will to do it, faith that the result is always going to pay back enormously in your harmony and your balance. That's faith. You don't know how, you have no axiom to say, this is just, if I do it this way, I'm going to achieve this. You don't know. You have faith in it. That's the positive way. So they continue this mentally intense experience, of letting go the anger, be understood, of letting the anger be understood, accepted, and integrated. Understood, accepted. Understood, lower chakras, accepted, heart, and integrated. That just means you balance it out with the mind-body-spirit complex. The other self, basically the person that pissed you off or made you angry, then obviously is transformed because now you see the gift that they gave you. Like I said, you were able to experience this and you survived this. It's almost like you come out of, every hero should always I don't want to say the word worship, but respect their villains after they are, I'm not going into Hollywood's depiction of of the villain, but you know what I mean. It's those villains in our world that should always be accepted and loved. So that's the positive side. That's how it should be done. Ra says, continues now for the negatives. The negatively oriented mind-body-spirit complex will use this anger in a similarly conscious fashion, refusing to accept the undirected or random energy of anger and instead, through will and faith, funneling this energy into a practical means of venting the negative aspect of this emotion so as to obtain control over other self or otherwise control the situation causing anger. So, for the negative path, what it needs to do is to use it similarly, but in this case, it's control. It's control and repression. Accept the undirected or random energy of anger, and instead, through will and fate, again, funneling this energy into a practical means of venting the negative aspect of this emotion so as to obtain control over the other self or otherwise control the situation causing anger. If you can control the situation that is causing you anger, psychopathic behavior and training, for that matter, I think this gets a little bit dark if I talk about like MK Ultra and all those things that they talk about that secret governments have done for a long time, how to create psychopaths, which is just allow them, or not allow them, but train them to control everything by doing some really nasty things to them. That's how you create basically negative entities. You know, you can do this by breaking someone, basically, and this is the way. The way is control and repression, because once you use that, once you control the anger, then you can use it, and you can use it for your benefit over other people. Like they say, control over other self or otherwise control the situation causing anger. Because once you control it, once you, they say, funneling this energy into practical means of venting the negative aspect of this emotion, they will use this. It's almost like, I will use my hate for my own benefits. That is the negative path. It's using your hate for negative purposes, of course, for controlling, for manipulating, for threatening or coercing, any sort of manipulation, actually, that you can think of. That is the negative path. And you see, like, there is no, we'll get to that. I hope this is explained here. Let me go on. We're almost, let's see. Control is the key. Yeah, I think this is the last part. Control is the key to negatively polarized use of catalysts. Acceptance is the key to positively polarized use of catalysts. Between these polarities lies the potential for this random and undirected energy, creating a bodily complex analog of what you call the cancerous growth of tissue. So, just to recap, control is the key to negatively polarized use of catalysts. If you control your anger and it doesn't affect you in the way that it's the third possibility. The people who are developing cancer, basically, are those who are not using control to use this anger in a negative sense for manipulating others and using their hate for others. Basically, that's what it is, right? Then you just have, a poker face outside. You're just using all that anger and hate and all the negative stuff that happened to you for controlling other people. That is the negative way. The acceptance is the key to positively polarized use of the catalyst, because anger can be used, of course. That doesn't mean, oh no, don't worry about your anger, think happy thoughts, and all this stuff. Like, that's avoiding it. That's repressing it. That's not what this is about. This is what got us into so much cancer, in this way, because there is too much repression. Look at society right now. There is repression of everything. People cannot express themselves. This is what, obviously, the elite, the Orion group, creating an elite here, that's the philosophy. You make people repress everything. So now there is political correctness everywhere. There is, a certain language you can use or not, and, it's not that I don't want to advocate anything here, but I do want to emphasize that the way we repress our emotions is the way we become dormant, and we become really messy physically, So it's the key. The key is always to feel, to feel the emotion, feel it, and see where it takes you. In a positive. That's the thing. I mean, we haven't been trained or educated in positive ways. And there's always so much distortion in our teachings. The fact that we don't even know that reincarnation is a fact. The fact that we don't know that just, you know, it's metaphysics, or the possibility of something being out there, whatever it is, you know. We don't even acknowledge consciousness. I mean, we are a very uneducated society in terms of who we are. So what can we expect of the reactions that we will have for managing our emotions? They tell you, they teach you, you know, to it may be changing now, but you know, the dogma is to, you know, just remain calm. Why? You know, if you feel anger, feel it, you know, use it. Use the anger positively, which is accepting it, but you have to feel it first. And so, you know, that is the key to positively polarized use of this catalyst, is acceptance. That is the key thing. Between the two polarities, of course, if you don't use it in an accepting way, and you're just repressing it and saying, oh, I don't know, you know, whatever my parents did to me, or my brothers, or my boss, or my husband, or my whatever they did to me, it's fine, you know, I don't need to, I'm over it, you know, I'm done with that, you know, I passed the page, I turned the page, you know. No, you're repressing it. You gotta visit it and say, because it'll trigger you again. You know, it'll trigger you when you're drunk, or when you're, you know, I don't know, dealing with somebody who pisses you off, or you're always gonna, you just gotta follow it. So, anyhow, far from me to be, you know, an advisor here on what to do with these situations. The point is that between these polarities lies the potential for this random and undirected energy creating a bodily complex analog of what you call cancerous growth of tissue, basically cancer growing. Because if you're not dealing with this in the negative or the positive, then you're just storing it in you. It makes sense. Let me visualize it to you this way. If you receive energy from outside, or actually, it's you don't receive energy. You receive a stimulus from outside, the catalyst, and that catalyst moves energy in you, and that energy is stuck somewhere, and you don't allow it to go anywhere. You just say, "No, I'm done with that. I know what this means, you know. I'm just remembering all things, you know, but I'm done with that." So you just push it down, you know, in like in the cartoons when they just push somebody out of, you know, the frame, just want them to show whatever. That's what you're doing, and you're repressing it there. And that energy is just going to be stuck there. It's going to be fed day by day. Every time is stimulated, it's going to keep creating a random movement of energy that is taken by the body, because your mind cannot deal with that much. That's why trauma, you know, sometimes it's there and you release it and you feel like, I feel new, like I have more energy, because that trauma was just repressing energy in there. So if you can use this energy and just feel it, allow it to flow, and all energy just wants to naturally go up. That energy wants to go through the chakras. That's the point. You know, that's why we have the kundalini, right? It's energy flowing up and down. It's just like a recirculation. But if you don't allow it, then it's just going to say, well, my mind can deal with this. Let's put it in the body. You know, let's just put it into the posset so it can be physically observed, physically felt. You know, the catalyst becomes physical now. And so, in the negative sense, see what you're doing is that you are allowing the energy to flow, but you're not accepting it. No acceptance. But you're using it for outward purposes. You are using it for the negative path, which is manipulation and control over others, dominion. And so that anger manifests actually in the controlling of other people, groups, societies, worlds, etc. That's how the negative, the energy of anger can be used negatively. So, I think that's all I can get out of this. It's just, let's go to conclusions after this nice answer, which really shows that it's not only anger. This goes with fear. This goes with sadness and anything else. I think those are the three major things that we have in the three main emotions. Everything else can be derived from that. You know, frustration is sort of anger. You know, I don't know, panic, anxiety is a form of fear, and so on. So these three are key, you know, for us to understand how the energy is being processed through us. Is there anger? Is there fear? Is there some sort of sadness is the best word I can use, or depression, or sadness and fear. It's almost like it's similar. I mean, you can just see the main emotions, the trinity there. If you can see these, and you can see how they repeat, they're cyclical. Catalysts will repeat until it's no longer useful. That's the thing. Emotions are response to catalysts, is to tell you, hey, you know, we're having this reaction here. We are reacting to whatever it is, you know, that's causing us fear, anger, or whatever it may be, sadness. If you can use that, and you can allow it to be, and you understand it, then you accept it, and you integrate it in yourself, then that is the way to not only just positively polarize because I'm a positive being and I want to go to fourth density, and no, it's just because that is harmony for your life. It allows you to be much more relieved and, you know, balanced. So that is the positive way of doing this. I think it's a good recipe. Again, everything goes down to love. Love is accepting. Accepting, you know, is just taking everything for what it is. The more you are into knowing yourself, to know who you are, then the easier it becomes to accept everything, because the more you know that you are everything, like I said, you know, in the example that you are your environment. I mean, you're more than that, of course, but your perception limits your view of the creation. But anything that enters in your perception of awareness, you should consider it, oh, that's me. You know, that's totally me. You know, the sun rising, that's me, I'm doing that. You know, the guy walking down, you know, down the street, that's me as well. You know, the leaves falling, that's me. Everything is me. You know, something that makes me fearful, angry, whatever, that's me. Let me just see how it's me being reflected there. So, you know, the more you see that, the easier it is to accept everything. And that will be integrated in you. Catalysts will cease to exist. And that just makes sense in general. So that's all I got for this video. Second part, we're gonna keep going in the lines of Cancer. I didn't want to make this video longer than this. I wanted to cover this whole session, but there was, as usual, much to talk about this stuff. So thank you for watching. As usual, I appreciate that. I love you for being who you are, because if you're watching this, that just means that you are me. I'm in your field of perception, and I am you. So with that, I'll see you in part 2 of session 46.